I warned her. I knew it was a bad idea. She wanted to go to him despite everything. I told her not to do it, gave her a chance to think. But she didn't listen. She went ahead and now she got what she deserved. I was never the kind of guy who believed in fate, but looking back, I wonder if all of this was set in motion long before I even saw the signs. Maybe some things are just meant to fall apart. Maybe some people are born to betray. It started with a single lie. Not an obvious one, not something that screamed, "I'm cheating on you," but a tiny, seemingly insignificant change in the way she answered a question. It was a Tuesday night and she was getting ready to go out. She had her hair curled, her lips painted a shade of red she used to save for date nights with me. I watched her in the mirror as I sat on the bed, casually scrolling through my phone, pretending not to notice the extra effort she was putting in. "Where are you going?" I asked. "Just out with some coworkers," she said, slipping an earring into place. Simple enough. A normal response. But something was off. She didn't mention names, didn't tell me where, didn't throw in an unnecessary "ugh, work people are so exhausting" like she used to. It was a clean, precise answer, carefully constructed. And right there, something in my gut twisted. "Who exactly?" I pushed. She hesitated for just a second. A fraction of a second. Barely enough for a normal person to catch. "But I did." "You don't know them," she said. I put my phone down. "I don't?" She finally turned around, putting on that fake little smile, the one she used when she wanted to shut down a conversation before it even started. "No, you don't. Stop being weird." That was it. A simple exchange. Nothing dramatic. No screaming, no slamming doors. But it was the moment I knew. A week later, I confirmed it. She had been careless. Maybe she thought I wasn't paying attention, or maybe she was so caught up in whatever she had with him that she forgot who she was dealing with. Either way, it didn't take much. A glance at her phone when she left it unlocked on the kitchen counter. A single message popping up, just enough for me to see the name. Brian. I wasn't going to jump to conclusions. Not yet. So I did what any sane man would do, I followed her. She said she was working late. Instead, she drove across town to a quiet little restaurant, the kind of place couples go when they don't want to be seen. I sat in my car, parked 2 spots away, watching through the rain-speckled windshield as she stepped inside. Less than a minute later, he walked in after her. I didn't need to see anything else. The way she smiled at him, the way she leaned in when he spoke, her fingers brushing against his arm, it told me everything. That night, I didn't say a word. I didn't confront her, didn't demand answers. Instead, I waited. Because if she thought she was clever, if she thought she was getting away with this, she had no idea what was coming next. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of something I couldn't quite describe pressing down on me. It wasn't just anger. Anger is easy. Anger is loud and reckless. But this was something else. Something colder. Calculated. Lisa slept beside me, completely unaware that her little secret wasn't a secret anymore. Her breathing was steady, peaceful, like she hadn't just spent the evening leaning into another man's touch, whispering things she used to whisper to me. I turned my head slightly, watching her. In the dim glow of the streetlights slipping through the blinds, she looked almost innocent. Almost. But I knew better now. At some point, I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, my alarm was blaring. I turned it off before she could stir, got up, and went about my morning routine like nothing had changed. That was the hardest part, acting normal, pretending like I didn't know, because if I played my cards right, she wouldn't see it coming when I finally made my move. She came into the kitchen as I was pouring my coffee, wearing that old, oversized sweater she always threw on in the mornings. She yawned, rubbing her eyes. "Morning. Morning," I said casually, taking a sip. She opened the fridge, pulled out a carton of orange juice, and poured herself a glass. Just a normal morning. Just another day in the life of a lying, cheating woman who thought her husband was a fool. "So, what's your plan for today?" she asked, leaning against the counter. It was such an ordinary question, but it made something sharp twist inside me. I could almost hear the real question beneath it. "Are you going to be busy? Will you notice if I leave early? Will you be watching me?" I kept my expression neutral. "Nothing much. Work. Might grab a drink with Mike after." She nodded. That's nice. And that was it. No hesitation, no guilt flickering in her eyes. Just another day, another effortless lie. She kissed my cheek before heading off to get ready. I let her. Not because I wanted her to, but because I wanted to see how far she would take it. By the time she left for work, I already had a plan forming in my head. I waited a few hours before making my first move. I sent a text to her best friend, Rachel. Hey, do you know if Lisa's been stressed at work lately? She seems distracted. Rachel replied almost immediately. Not really. She actually seems happier lately. Why? Happier. Right? That's what happens when you're sneaking around, living a double life. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked our phone records. It was easy. We shared a plan and I had full access to the account. A few clicks and there it was, her call history, her texts, every number she'd been in contact with. His number was there. Over and over again. Late at night. Early in the mornings. Even while she was at work. I sat back, gripping the edge of my desk, my mind racing. I could confront her now. I had enough. But no, this wasn't just about catching her. This was about making sure she couldn't weasel her way out of it. So I waited. And by the end of that day, I had an even better plan. I played along for another week. It wasn't easy. Every time she smiled at me, every time she laughed at one of my jokes or kissed me goodnight, I felt something dark coil in my chest. It was a strange thing, realizing that the person you loved wasn't who you thought they were. Every shared memory, every late-night conversation, every whispered I love you, it all felt tainted now, like a carefully crafted illusion designed to keep me blind. But I wasn't blind anymore. I spent that week gathering more proof. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to make sure she had nowhere to run, no way to twist the story to make herself the victim. Because that's what people like her do, isn't it? They lie, they manipulate, they cry when they get caught, hoping to rewrite the narrative. Not this time. I already had their text history from our phone records, but I needed more. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I followed her again. This time, I wasn't just looking for confirmation. I was looking for proof she couldn't deny. Thursday night, she told me she was working late again. Same excuse, same forced casual tone. I smiled, kissed her on the cheek, and told her not to work too hard. Then, the moment she walked out the door, I grabbed my keys and left right after her. She didn't go to the office. Instead, she drove straight to a small hotel on the other side of town. Not a fancy one, not the kind of place business professionals book for out-of-town meetings. No, this was the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be seen. I parked a few spots away and watched as she got out of her car, adjusting her hair in the window's reflection. She was smiling, actually smiling, like a teenager sneaking off to meet her high school crush. A few minutes later, Brian arrived. I watched as he stepped out of his car, casually dressed, no briefcase, no work files. Just him and that smug, self-assured way he walked toward the entrance, like he belonged there, like he belonged with her. I could have gotten out right then, walked up to them, said her name, watched the color drain from her face as she realized she'd been caught. But that wasn't enough. I needed more. So I waited. An hour passed. Then two. I sat in my car, gripping my phone so tightly my fingers ached. Every time I imagined what was happening inside that hotel, my stomach twisted, but I forced myself to stay put, because this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about me. About taking control of the situation before she could spin it into something it wasn't. When she finally came out, she looked different, more relaxed, like she had just relieved herself of some invisible weight. She checked her phone, typed something quickly, probably some lie about how exhausted she was from work, and drove off. I let her go. Instead, I waited for Brian to leave, watched as he strolled to his car like he had nothing to lose. He had no idea I was there. No idea he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. I followed him. Not for long, just enough to see where he lived, to get a good look at the world he thought was untouched by consequences. A nice little apartment, nothing fancy. Probably a bachelor pad, free of responsibilities, free of guilt. He went inside and I sat there, staring at the building, feeling something shift inside me. I had everything I needed now. The texts, the hotel, the proof. But it wasn't just about proving she was cheating anymore. It was about making sure she understood exactly what she had done. And tomorrow night she would. I spent the next day in silence, letting my plans settle into place. Every time Lisa spoke to me, every time she smiled or touched my arm, I felt nothing. I had already detached myself from her. The woman standing in front of me wasn't my wife anymore, just a stranger who had been lying to my face, thinking she was smart enough to get away with it. She had no idea what was coming. That evening I made dinner. Nothing special, just a simple meal, something comforting. She walked in, dropping her bag by the door, stretching like she'd had a long day at work. She still didn't know I had watched her sneak out of that hotel room less than 24 hours ago. "Smells good," she said, stepping into the kitchen, brushing past me like everything was normal. Like we were normal. I smiled, setting 2 plates on the table. Figured we could have a nice, quiet night. She grinned. "You're sweet." Sweet? That word sat bitter on my tongue, but I swallowed it down. I wasn't sweet. I was patient. She talked about her day, leaving out all the important parts, of course. I let her. I nodded at the right times, smiled when she expected me to. She had no clue she was eating dinner with a man who had already decided how this night was going to end. Halfway through the meal, I leaned back, swirling my drink in my hand. "By the way, I ran into Rachel earlier today." Lisa's fork stopped midway to her mouth. A pause, barely noticeable, but I caught it. "Oh? Where?" "Coffee shop," I said easily. "She mentioned you've been really busy with work lately." She relaxed, nodding. "Yeah, it's been crazy." "That's so?" I tilted my head, watching her carefully. "Because I checked your call logs today." The room went silent. Her face didn't change immediately. No instant panic, no dramatic gasp. Just a slight narrowing of the eyes, her mind scrambling for the right move, the right excuse. "Why would you do that?" she asked, voice perfectly controlled. I let out a small laugh. "That's the question you're going with?" She set her fork down slowly, choosing her words carefully. "I don't understand why you check my phone records. Do you not trust me?" And there it was. I had given her a chance to come clean. A moment to own up to what she'd done. And instead, she was going to try to flip it on me. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Lisa, I know." She blinked. "No, what?" "Don't." My voice was sharp now. "Don't insult me like that." "I know. The texts. The hotel. Him." That was the moment I saw it, realization dawning in her eyes. She wasn't in control anymore. Her fingers curled into a fist on the table. "You followed me?" Interesting reaction, I mused. Not "I'm sorry," not "I can explain," just "you followed me?" She pushed back from the table, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That's insane, Daniel. You're spying on me?" I let out a dry chuckle, shaking my head. "You really think that's gonna work? You think you're gonna turn this around and make me the bad guy?" Her face twisted, something between anger and panic flashing in her expression. She hadn't expected this. She had convinced herself I was clueless, that she had this under control. I stood up slowly. "Say it, Lisa." She crossed her arms, shifting her weight. "Say what?" "Say you cheated." She scoffed, rolling her eyes. "This is ridiculous." I slammed my hand down on the table, the sound echoing through the room. "Say it." She jumped, eyes wide, and for the first time that night, I saw it, fear. Not because I'd hurt her. I never would. But because she realized she wasn't the one calling the shots anymore. She clenched her jaw, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Fine. You want me to say it? I cheated. There. Happy now?" I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because I had one. I stepped back, nodding. "Good. Now let's talk about what happens next." Lisa stood there, arms crossed, jaw clenched, waiting for me to speak. Now that she had said it, now that the word was out in the open, something had shifted between us. The power she thought she had, the control she had been holding onto, it was gone. She knew it. And I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out how to get it back. I wasn't going to let that happen. She exhaled sharply, tapping her fingers against her arm. "All right. You know. What now? You want to scream at me? Throw something? What do you want, Daniel?" I tilted my head slightly, watching her. "That's the best you've got? No excuses? No, it didn't mean anything?" She let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Would it matter?" "That depends." I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. "Did it mean anything?" She hesitated. Just for a second. But it was long enough. I nodded to myself. That's what I thought. She sucked in a breath like she was trying to steady herself. Look, I'm not going to stand here and beg for forgiveness if you're just going to throw this in my face for the rest of our lives. I smiled, slow and deliberate. You think we have a rest of our lives after this? That got her. A flicker of something crossed her face. Not regret, no, Lisa wasn't the type to feel regret. But panic. Because for the first time, she was realizing she wasn't the one making the decisions anymore. She shifted on her feet. So that's it? You're just done. Oh, I was done the second I saw you walk into that hotel, I said, my voice calm. This, I gestured between us. This conversation? This isn't about me deciding. This is about making you understand exactly what you threw away. Her lips parted, like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. I stepped closer, watching her carefully. Tell me something, Lisa. Did you ever think about me? Even once. She blinked. What? When you were with him. I kept my voice steady. When you were sneaking around, sending those messages, making excuses, lying to my face. Did you ever stop and think, maybe I shouldn't do this? Maybe I shouldn't betray the man who's been by my side for 6 years. She swallowed. Of course I thought about you. I studied her, waiting. And she hesitated again. Then, quieter. I did it anyway. That was it. The truth, raw and exposed. I exhaled slowly, nodding. All right. She furrowed her brows. All right. That's all I needed to hear. She shifted uneasily. What does that mean? It means I'm done here, I said simply. She frowned, like she was expecting some kind of explosion, some dramatic fight, but I wasn't going to give her that. She didn't deserve my anger. I grabbed my keys from the counter and started walking toward the door. Her voice wavered slightly. Where are you going? I paused with my hand on the doorknob and turned to look at her. Somewhere you're not. Her face twisted, frustration creeping in. Oh, so that's it? You just walk away? I shrugged. What, you thought I'd stay? Forgive you? Pretend like this never happened? I shook my head. No, Lisa. You chose this. Now you get to live with it. She opened her mouth to argue, to say something, but I didn't wait to hear it. I opened the door, stepped out, and I didn't look back. I didn't go far. I didn't need to. I just needed space, needed to breathe air that wasn't tainted by her lies, needed to exist somewhere that didn't feel like a crime scene. Because that's what our home was now, wasn't it? A place where something had died. I sat in my car, gripping the wheel, staring at the dashboard while my mind spun in circles. I should have felt relief. I had finally confronted her. She admitted it. There was no more gaslighting, no more wondering if I was crazy for suspecting her. It was over. So why did I feel like I had just lost? The betrayal was one thing. The cheating, the sneaking around, the lying. I had prepared myself for that. But it was the way she reacted that stuck with me. No real remorse. No guilt. Just frustration that she got caught. She didn't fight for me. She didn't even try. And that hurt more than anything. Because it meant that at some point, maybe months ago, maybe longer, she had already decided I wasn't worth it. I sat there for over an hour, replaying every moment in my head, every red flag I had ignored, every excuse she had made. And then, finally, I made a decision. I pulled out my phone and called Mike. Mike had been my best friend since college. The kind of guy who never sugarcoated anything, never let me feel sorry for myself. When he picked up, I didn't even have to say anything. Where are you? He asked immediately. In my car. You sound like shit. Feel like it too. A pause. Then, you told her. I let out a dry laugh. Yeah, she admitted it. Jesus. He exhaled sharply. All right, listen. You coming over or do I need to come get you? I hesitated. I don't know where to go. You're not going back there, he said firmly. Not tonight. Not ever if you're smart. I ran a hand over my face. I have to. My stuff is there. So what? You need clothes? We'll buy you clothes. You need a bed? I got a couch. You need a drink? I got a whole damn bar. I almost smiled at that. Almost. Give me 20 minutes, I said. When I pulled up to Mike's place, he was already waiting outside, leaning against his doorframe with a beer in his hand. He took one look at me and shook his head. You look like hell. Feel like it too. He handed me the beer without another word. We sat on his couch in silence for a while, the TV playing some random late-night show we weren't actually watching. Eventually, Mike spoke. So what's the plan? I stared at the bottle in my hands. Divorce, I guess. He let out a low whistle. You sure? I turned my head slowly, giving him a look. Would you stay? Hell no. Then yeah. I muttered. I'm sure. Mike nodded, taking a sip of his beer. Good. Then we make sure she doesn't screw you over in the process. The idea of dealing with legal battles, of untangling 6 years of marriage, of fighting over who got what, it exhausted me just thinking about it. But at the same time, I knew there was no other way. I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. She made her choice. Now she was going to deal with the consequences. The next morning, I woke up on Mike's couch with a stiff neck and a pounding headache. It took me a few seconds to remember why I was there, why my entire body felt like it had been through a war. Then it hit me. Lisa, the confession. The moment she admitted it without even flinching. The weight of it pressed down on my chest. But this time, it didn't paralyze me. This time, it fueled me. I wasn't going to let this drag on. I wasn't going to wallow to let her control the narrative. If she thought she was going to walk away from this with her dignity intact, she had another thing coming. Mike walked into the living room, tossing me a bottle of water. Figured you'd need that. I caught it, unscrewing the cap. Appreciate it. He plopped down in the chair across from me, sipping his coffee. So, what's the first move? I took a deep breath. I'm going back there. Packing my stuff. He raised an eyebrow. You sure that's a good idea? Yeah. I want to be the one to leave. Not her. Me. Mike smirked. Fair enough. You want backup? I think I can handle it. He nodded, but his expression told me he wasn't convinced. Just don't let her mess with your head, man. Women like that? They know how to twist things, make you second-guess yourself. I gave him a tight smile. I won't. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my heart was pounding harder than I wanted to admit. The house looked the same, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. Lisa's car was parked out front. Of course it was. I stepped inside without knocking because why the hell would I? This was still my house. For now. She was in the kitchen, dressed in a loose sweater and leggings, drinking coffee like this was just another morning. Like we hadn't stood in this exact room the night before, tearing our marriage apart. She looked up when I walked in, her expression unreadable. You're back. Just getting my stuff. She set her mug down slowly. So that's it then? You're leaving? I let out a short, humorless laugh. Should I stay? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she crossed her arms, watching me. You're really just going to walk away from everything we built? I scoffed. We didn't build anything. I did. You were too busy tearing it down. Her jaw tightened. You're acting like I never loved you. I stopped, turning to face her fully. Did you? She swallowed. Of course I did. Past tense. I gave her a cold smile. Good to know. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. I don't want this to get ugly. I tilted my head. Ugly? You think this isn't ugly? Lisa, you cheated. You threw away our marriage for what? Some office fling with a guy who's probably already looking for his next conquest? Her face darkened. You don't know anything about Brian. I laughed, shaking my head. Oh, that's rich. You really think he's different? That you're special? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Newsflash. Lisa, guys like him don't stick around. The second this stops being fun for him, he's gone. And then what? You come crawling back to me? She flinched, just slightly. I turned away, heading for the bedroom. Save it. I'm done. I packed fast. Clothes, personal items, important documents. Everything I needed to walk away from this mess and never look back. I could feel her hovering in the doorway, watching me, probably waiting for me to crack. I didn't. When I zipped up my duffel bag and turned to leave, she finally spoke. Are you really never going to talk to me again? I met her eyes. Why would I? Her lips parted, but no words came out. Good. Let her sit with that. Let her feel even a fraction of what I felt. I walked past her without another word, grabbed my keys, and stepped outside. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I didn't give her the satisfaction of knowing how much she had broken me. I just left. I didn't look back. Not when I reached my car, not when I pulled out of the driveway, not when I turned the corner and left that house behind for good. If she was standing in the doorway watching me leave, if she was crying, if she was regretting it, none of that mattered anymore. Lisa had made her choice. Now she had to live with it. I drove without thinking, without a destination, just letting the road stretch ahead of me, letting the motion settle the storm inside my head. But no matter how far I went, one thought kept gnawing at me. She never fought for me. Not once. Not when I confronted her. Not when I packed my things. Not when I walked out the door. She didn't say I made a mistake. She didn't say please don't leave. She didn't say I love you. And that's how I knew whatever we had, whatever she once felt for me, it had died long before I ever caught her cheating. That realization should have brought closure. But all it did was leave a hollow space where my heart used to be. I ended up back at Mike's place. He didn't ask questions when I walked in, just tossed me another beer and turned on the TV. For a while, we sat in silence, watching some mindless action movie, but eventually he spoke. So, what's next? I took a slow sip, letting the question settle. Divorce. You talked to a lawyer yet? I shook my head. Tomorrow. Mike nodded. Good. Do it fast. Don't let her get ahead of you. That was the plan. I wasn't going to let Lisa drag this out, wasn't going to let her twist things in her favor. The sooner I got this over with, the sooner I could move on. But that didn't mean I was done with her yet. Lisa had humiliated me. She had betrayed me in the worst possible way, thrown away everything we built like it meant nothing. She had gotten away with it for months, sneaking around, lying to my face, making me feel like I was crazy for suspecting anything. She deserved consequences. And I was going to make sure she got them. The next morning I made 2 calls. The first was to a divorce lawyer. I told them everything, how I had proof of the affair, how I had phone records, texts, even the hotel visits. They assured me that legally I was in a strong position. That was good. The second call? Rachel, Lisa's best friend. Rachel had always been fiercely loyal to Lisa, the kind of friend who would back her up in any situation. But Rachel also had a strict moral code. And if there was one thing she hated more than anything, it was cheaters. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, Daniel? What's up? I exhaled, steadying my voice. I need to tell you something about Lisa. A pause. Okay. I didn't sugarcoat it. I laid it all out, the late-night phone calls, the texts, the hotel, the confession, everything. By the time I finished, Rachel was silent. Then finally she spoke. She cheated? Yeah. On you? Yeah. Another pause. Then a sharp intake of breath. That bitch? I almost laughed. So I take it you didn't know? Are you kidding? She never said a word. Rachel sounded furious. She lied to me too. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, could hear the anger building. She wasn't just pissed on my behalf, she was pissed that Lisa had played her for a fool, too. And that's exactly what I was counting on. I just thought you should hear it from me, I said smoothly. I know you guys are close. Rachel let out a bitter laugh. Not anymore. Yeah? Yeah, she said firmly. She's about to find out what it feels like to lose something important. I smiled. Good. Lisa might have thought she could get away with this, might have thought she could cheat, lie, and still keep the life she had. She was about to find out how wrong she was. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. I knew Rachel well enough to predict exactly how this would go. She wasn't the type to sit on information like this, wasn't the type to calmly process betrayal and move on. No, Rachel was a wrecking ball. Once she knew the truth, she would tear through Lisa's life like a storm, leaving nothing untouched. And that's exactly what happened. I was sitting at Mike's kitchen table, sipping coffee and scrolling mindlessly through my phone when the first text came in. Lisa, are you serious right now? You told Rachel? I smirked. That was fast. I didn't respond. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared. She was typing, deleting, retyping, struggling to find the right words. Good. Let her squirm. A minute later, my phone buzzed again. Lisa, you had no right to do that. No right? That was funny coming from her. I still didn't respond. Mike glanced over from the stove where he was making breakfast. She texting you? Yeah. Mad? Oh, she's furious. He snorted. Good. Another buzz. Lisa, Rachel just called me screaming. She's telling everyone. Do you know what you just did? I set my phone down, smiling to myself. I knew exactly what I had done. Lisa's world was crumbling, and I hadn't even gotten started yet. By noon, the calls started coming in. Mutual friends. People we'd known for years. Some checking in on me, some fishing for drama, all of them already aware of the situation. Rachel had not wasted time. By the time I stepped outside for some air, my phone buzzed again. Not Lisa this time. Brian. I stared at the name for a second, surprised he even had the audacity to reach out. Then I answered. What? A pause. Then you need to stop. I let out a slow, amused breath. Stop what? You know what? Lisa's life is falling apart right now. I laughed. Actually laughed. And? Brian's voice hardened. This isn't just about you and her anymore. Other people are getting dragged into this. I rolled my eyes. Oh, you mean you? Yeah, well, maybe you should have thought about that before you started screwing another man's wife. She came to me, he snapped. Oh, that makes it better? Silence. I could hear his breathing through the phone, sharp and irritated. He wasn't calling because he cared about Lisa. He was calling because his life was being disrupted. Look, Brian said finally, his tone forced calm. I get that you're hurt, but this is getting out of hand. People at work are talking. Lisa's reputation is tanking. I smirked. And? You need to move on. I let his words sit between us for a second. Then, with slow, deliberate ease, I said, Brian, buddy, you don't get to tell me what I need to do. I hung up. For the first time since this all started, I felt lighter. Lisa thought she could control everything, that she could cheat and still keep the life she had. She was learning now. Actions have consequences. Lisa's world fell apart faster than even I expected. Rachel had done her job well. Within 24 hours, Lisa went from being the confident, cheating woman who thought she could control the situation to someone desperately trying to put out fires she had started herself. Mutual friends were dropping her. People at work were whispering. And Brian? Well, he wasn't answering her calls anymore. I knew that because Rachel told me. After I dropped the bomb on her, she and Lisa had their screaming match, and from what I heard, it wasn't pretty. Rachel didn't just yell. She destroyed her, called her selfish, a liar, a fake friend. And then she went one step further. She told everyone. Lisa had underestimated how much people actually liked me. She had convinced herself that if she ever got caught, she could talk her way out of it. That people would take her side. She was wrong. When she realized what was happening, that her carefully crafted world was crumbling, that she was now the woman everyone whispered about, she finally cracked. And that's when she showed up at Mike's place. It was late. Mike and I were sitting in his living room watching a game when we heard the knock. A sharp, urgent knock. Mike raised an eyebrow. You expecting someone? I sighed, already knowing who it was. I opened the door and there she was. Lisa. Her eyes were red like she had been crying. Her hair a little messy like she had been running her hands through it all day. She wasn't dressed up, wasn't wearing her usual confident smirk. No, she looked shaken. Can we talk? She asked, voice small. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Talk. Please, Daniel. Mike stepped behind me, taking one look at her and then turning back toward the living room. I'm gonna get another beer. You need me, just yell. Lisa swallowed, waiting until Mike was out of earshot before speaking. Can we just go somewhere? Just us. I let out a short laugh. We are just us. You don't like it. She exhaled sharply. I deserve that. Oh, you deserve a lot more. She bit her lip, looking down at her hands. I don't know what to do. Everyone hates me. Rachel won't even speak to me. I shrugged. Should have thought of that before you slept with Brian. Her face twisted in frustration. I made a mistake. No, I cut her off. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk at the store. A mistake is sending a text to the wrong person. You? You made a choice. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't care. I miss you, she whispered. I stared at her. You miss me? I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. Lisa, you didn't even fight for me. She flinched. You had every chance to stop, I continued. Every text. Every lie. Every time you walked into that hotel. You chose him over me. She wiped at her face. I was stupid. You were selfish. Silence. Then, softly, I still love you. I tilted my head. No, you don't. She blinked. What? I gave her a small, cold smile. You don't love me, Lisa. You just miss what I gave you. Stability. Loyalty. A place to land when things go bad. I stepped back, gripping the door. Well, guess what? You don't have that anymore. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but I didn't give her the chance. I shut the door in her face. And just like that, it was over. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I wasn't broken. I was free.